Hello, today I'll be doing a discography review. This time it'll be for the band Deftones, one of my personal favorite bands, maybe in my top 10. I mean, I've been a fan of these guys since, I want to say 2010, 2011, somewhere around there, but yeah, been a fan of these guys for over a decade now, and I still love their music all these years later. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this review. So yeah, the band started or formed in 1988 and eventually dropped their first album, Adrenaline, in 1995. Pretty good album. Not my favorite from them. Maybe one of my favorites, arguably, maybe. Honestly, it depends on the day for me or my mood, but I still really enjoy this album. It's the band at their most raw, and there's still many songs off of here that I still enjoy to this day. Maybe some songs on here that are maybe some of my favorite songs from the band. But yeah, some of the highlights on here, we got Bored, Minus Blindfold, Root, which I think is maybe one of their most underrated songs. I really like that song a lot. Engine Number 9, which was in the movie Law Abiding Citizen, if I remember correctly. And also you have the song 7 Words, which is one of my personal favorite Deftones songs. I really like that song a lot. But yeah, pretty good debut from Deftones. Again, not my favorite, but maybe one of my favorites, maybe. But overall, pretty solid debut, I'd say. But then they do even better with their sophomore album, Around the Fur, which is, at this point, one of my favorite albums of all time. I absolutely love this album. Not a single weak track on it. I mean, the singles on here are great. My Own Summer, which I believe that was the song, that song was my introduction to the band. I still really love that song. Be Quiet and Drive, another song that's definitely one of their best. But I mean, the deep cuts on this album are pretty damn good. Labia, I really like the title track, Around the Fur. Rickets is a through and through, definitely a banger. Lotion is also really good. I also like MX, kind of an underrated song. You also do get a hidden track in that song called Damone. And if you haven't heard Damone, definitely check it out after this video, again, if you haven't heard it, or if you haven't heard it in a while. But I also have the song Head Up, which features Max Cavalera, definitely a great frontman. I mean, he's great in Sepultura, Soulfly, Nail Bomb, Cavalier Conspiracy. If you're not familiar with Max Cavalera's work, definitely do some research and definitely check out his bands, especially the bands that I just named. But yeah, absolutely love this album. One of my favorite albums of all time, and probably my favorite Deftones album. But next we'll be moving to their big album, or maybe their commercial peak, arguably, and that is White Pony. So yeah, they push the experimentation much more with this album. I also have these 2 CDs here, which were released around this time or whatever, but these are promotional CDs that I got either on eBay or Discogs. But anyways, back to this album. Some people point to this album as their best. This album is my second favorite, and yeah, definitely another classic for the band, and of course, again, one of their best. But you got highlights like Digital Bath, which is one of their best songs in my opinion. You have the song Elite, which was nominated for Best Metal Performance, if I remember correctly. I also really like the big song on here, Change and the House of Flies, a song that I do have a soft spot for, because I remember that was one of the songs I listened to a lot when I was younger from this album. Knife Party being another song for me that I went back to a lot when I was younger. Knife Party, at this point, probably one of my favorite Deftones songs. Honestly, in my top 10. I absolutely love that song. Passenger is also, of course, great. I mean, it features Maynard James Keenan from Tool and A Perfect Circle. But yeah, Passenger, another highlight off the album for me. You have the more experimental song, Teenager, which is a song that I've grown to like much more over time. But yeah, all around, really great album and definitely one of their best. Then you move to 2003 with their self-titled album, Deftones. And I'll be honest, this album has never been one of my favorites, even though they do bring the heavy with some of the songs on here. It's never been one of my favorites, but I would say that I like it much more now compared to when I first became a fan. It's still not one of my personal favorites from the band, but still, honestly, a pretty good album. I think it starts off really strong with the first 6 songs. I mean, Hexagram has grown to be one of my favorite Deftones songs. Minerva is a pretty good song. You can hear the shoegaze influence in that one a little bit. Needles and Pins is also really good, another favorite of mine off the album. But you have some songs on here that I think are kind of somewhat underrated, like Good Morning Beautiful. They really bring the heavy with the underrated song When Girls Telephone Boys. I really like that song a lot. I'd also say Bloody Cape is also kind of underrated too. Now you have the song Lucky You, which I recently gave a recent re-listen, and I really dig that song. That song is kind of the teenager on this album. It's the experimental song on the album, and I really dig that song actually, especially much more now. And that song was also on the Matrix Reloaded soundtrack, so a little fun fact there. But Moana, not one of their best closing tracks in my opinion, but still not a bad song. It's decent. Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event has always been my least favorite song on the album, and honestly maybe one of my least favorite Deftones songs. Not terrible, it's just never been a song that ever really stood out to me and within their discography. But not terrible, but overall pretty good Deftones album. Even if it's not one of my personal favorites, I still think it's overall pretty good. But next we'll be moving to Saturday Night Wrist, but before that they did drop this compilation right here, B-Sides and Rarities, which is also pretty cool to have in the collection. But their next album was Saturday Night Wrist, which you can make the argument is maybe their most experimental album, and overall a pretty good album. Again, not one of the best, but still, and it might not be for every fan, but for me personally, I'd say another pretty good album from the band. I think Deftones has no bad albums. This album is maybe one of their more challenging albums to get into, but for me personally, I dig the album. I mean, you definitely have some highlights here. Hole in the Earth, which is maybe one of their best songs. Yes, it also have some pretty good deep cuts in this album, especially like, or lesser known songs like Cherry Waves, Kim Dracula, Beware, I think it's a really underrated song. Rats, Rats, Rats is also pretty good, one of the heavier cuts on here. You do get an instrumental on here, which is track number 6. You also have the song Main, which features Serge Tankian from System of a Down, another band that's one of my personal favorite bands. I absolutely love System of a Down, Toxicity being one of my favorite albums of all time. But yeah, this album shows the band going into their more experimental side, but still pretty interesting listen, and overall pretty good album. But next we'll be moving to Diamond Eyes, their first album without Chi, and enters Sergio Vega as the new bass player, and who's no longer with the band now. But yeah, I became a fan around when this album came out. It was like a little bit after this album came out or something like that. Again, that was a long time ago, but either way, with this album, some people point to it as one of their best. It is one of the fan favorites, and yeah, really great album. The title track I do have a soft spot for, because I know that was at least one of the first few Deftones songs I ever heard. I really like that song still, all these years later. I think Command Control, even while it is a bit of a shorter song, I still really like that song. I think it's kind of an underrated song also. But I think the singles on here are really strong. Some of the singles maybe being some of their best songs maybe, but Beauty School really shows that Deftones have a really great ear for melody, especially with the chorus. Rocket Skates shows off their heavier side, and I really like that song also. Risk is kind of an underrated song. I really like that one. Same with Prince. But yeah, overall, another really good album from Deftones. But next we'll be moving to Koinoyokan. I remember losing it when they dropped the first single, Leathers. I absolutely loved that song when it first came out, and I still love it today. Maybe one of my favorite Deftones songs, and also easily one of the highlights off the album, I'd say. But honestly, there are days where I might like this album more than Diamond Eyes, or there might be other days where I might like Diamond Eyes more, but this album is really strong in my opinion. You could make the argument that the first half is maybe stronger, but still, I think the second half is also pretty good too. Tempest and Goon Squad, I really like those songs, but some of my favorites on here, Swerve City. I think Romantic Dreams is kind of an underrated song. Of course, Leathers is another favorite of mine. I think Entombed is maybe one of their most underrated or one of their most overlooked songs. One of the more experimental songs on here, but I personally really dig it, especially Chino's vocals in that song, especially, such as in the chorus. Again, love that song. If you haven't heard it in a while, definitely check it out. Give it another listen. Poltergeist is another heavier song on here that I think is pretty good. I do remember around when this album came out, I do remember hearing Tempest on the radio. That's a pretty good song, but yeah. Really great album from Deftones. Pretty strong release from them. But next we'll be moving to arguably maybe their most divisive album, and that is Gore. And when this album came out, I was one of its defenders, and I still defend this album. And yeah, I do agree that it is their weakest or their worst, but I wouldn't say it's a bad album. I mean, yes, it is less riff focused compared to some of their other albums, but still, I remember when Prayers Triangles came out. That was the first single. I was really into that song when it first came out, and I'd say it's definitely one of the highlights off here. Also, I think Phantom Bride, especially nowadays, kind of overlooked a little bit. Maybe one of the fan favorites off of here, but not talked about as much nowadays compared to, I don't know, some other songs in their recent albums. But Phantom Bride, I really like that song, featuring Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains. Another great band. Excuse me. But also you have the song Rubicon, which is the album closer. That's another favorite of mine off the album, and also somewhat kind of overlooked, kind of underrated. One of my personal favorites, again, on the album. If you like the band's heavier side, then you'll like the song Doomed User. Heart's Wires is another favorite of mine off the album. When you get towards the middle of the album, that's where things start to get kind of hit or miss for me, or not as strong. Track number 6, Patura Infamante, however you pronounce that. That's maybe one of my least favorite Deftones songs at this point. It's just never been a song that ever really stood out to me. Not straight up horrible or terrible or god-awful, just for me, just not a very interesting song. But that's just my personal opinion. If you like that song, more power to you, and definitely nothing wrong with that. Again, not a bad song, but easily, especially since the album's release, it's always been one of my least favorites off the album. Acid Hologram is another pretty good song on here. But yeah, overall, a good, solid Deftones album. Again, one of their weaker albums, but not bad. Next, we'll be moving to their most recent album, Ohms, which critically and with fan reception did really well. Definitely got its share of acclaim, and yeah, definitely deserves it. Really strong album. I also have, my copy comes with a signed CD booklet. But yeah, real cool. I mean, one of my favorite albums of 2020, and there's still some songs off this album that I still enjoy, especially the song Urantia. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, but absolutely love that song. Maybe one of the best songs they've done within their modern era. I also think the singles are also pretty solid. I don't know if I'd say some of their best singles, but still overall pretty good singles. The title track and Genesis, pretty good. Ceremony, another highlight for me off the album. I also really like the song Radiant City, especially riff-wise. I really dig that song. This Link is Dead, one of the heavier songs off of here, and still pretty good. Not one of my favorites off the album, but still I do like that song. Now the song Error, that's maybe that's got to be one of the most overlooked songs off here. I really like that song a lot, especially Chino's vocals. Maybe one of his best vocal performances on the album. I'd maybe go that far. I really like that song a lot. But yeah, honestly, you really can't go wrong with any of the songs on here. Pretty damn good album. But yeah, that is their most recent album. They did, of course, do the 20th anniversary CD or release of White Pony, and I'll admit it's been a long time since I've listened to anything off of this, but my favorites are easily the remix for Knife Party and Passenger. Knife Party maybe being my favorite remix off the album, but yeah, overall it's decent. There are a few remixes on here that didn't quite work for me. I remember being not all that satisfied with the remix of Change Found that to be kind of maybe one of the weaker remixes on here, but again, that's just my personal opinion. And also, it has been a long time, so I might have to give this another re-listen, but yeah. So yeah, that is my discography review for Deftones. Let me know your thoughts on my review. Let me know your thoughts on these albums. Let me know some of your favorite or least favorite songs or albums from the band and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like, subscribe. Have a nice day and take care.